Today, let's find out about desert discoveries. Welcome to the desperate desert. How's this for a change of scene? Within minutes of arriving, you might wish you were back at sea. You'll be horribly hot and bothered and dying for a drink. Even the local people have a tough time keeping their cool. So why on earth would intrepid explorers risk being fried alive in this place? Again, some of them wanted to open the desert up for trade and settlement, but others had heard rumors of a fabled desert cities and wanted to visit them for themselves. They didn't worry about the danger. What danger? Talk about sticking your head in the sand. Here's a horrible health warning. The dreadful desert heat and the lack of food and water can drive even the hardiest explorer barking mad. Take intrepid French explorer René Caillet. In 1827, René set off to cross the deadly Sahara Desert in Africa. Here's what he said about his appalling ordeal. I was reduced to extremity. My eyes were hollow, I panted for breath, and my tongue hung out of my mouth. I recollect that at every halt I fell to the ground from weakness, and not even the strength to eat. I was not, however, the worst off, for I saw several drink their own urine. Intrepid Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta's motto was, "Never travel the same road twice." Sounds adventurous, doesn't it? But this must have made it horribly difficult for him to find his way back home. There he is. Ibn Battuta was born in Tangier, Morocco. He must have had a good education because he trained to be a judge. Battuta was a devout Muslim, a person who follows the religion of Islam. And when he was 21, he threw his bags on a camel and set off across the desert to Arabia. He wanted to visit Mecca, the Muslims' holiest city. It was a trip that changed his life. On the way, Battuta met a wise old man who dreamed Ibn would be a great explorer. He must have been a good judge of character. Here's an earth-shattering fact for you. Ibn Battuta's full name was Abu Abd Allah Muhammad ibn Abd Allah al-Lawati Atanji ibn Battuta. What a mouthful. By the time he'd introduced himself to people he met on his travels, they got bored and gone off to talk to someone else. Ibn Battuta was well and truly bitten by the exploring bug. For 30 years, he was hardly ever at home. On his way to Mecca, he popped into Egypt and Syria. Then he crossed the dusty Arabian desert to Persia and Iraq. Next, he hopped on a ship and sailed down the east coast of Africa to as far as exotic Zanzibar. You name it, he went there. His feet barely touched the ground. He must have spent a fortune on postcards home. There's one that he must have maybe written to his mom. Dear Mom, having a lovely time. I am now in Egypt. Or is it Persia? Hang on. I'll nip out and have a look. Sorry for the soggy postcard. I forgot I was on a ship. Wish you were here, your loving son, Ibn Battuta. Everywhere he went, he was treated like an honored guest, and soon his name was on everyone's lips. Around 1333, Ibn Battuta reached India. He made friends with the Sultan of Delhi and got a job at a court as a judge. Going by what we know from his notes, he was very happy in India. and spent the next 8 years there. He earned pots of dosh and had a big posh place to live in. But then his luck changed for the worse. He fell out with the Sultan, who threw him into prison. Later, the Sultan changed his mind and the two became friends again. The Sultan released him and sent him to China as his official ambassador. But even the most intrepid explorers get homesick eventually. And after a few years in China, Ibn Battuta decided to head home. He reached Tangier in Morocco in 1349, after 24 years on the road. It's a wonder anyone remembered who on earth he was. Now you might think Intrepid Ibn would have been glad to unpack his bags and put his feet up for a change. Well, wouldn't you? But he didn't hang around for long. There was a place he still hadn't visited, and he had a burning desire to go. So in 1351, he set off again for the scorching Sahara Desert. After crossing the Atlas Mountains, he hitched a lift with a camel caravan for the long trek across the desert. It was horribly hard going. The sand stung his eyes and got up his nose, and he was driven mad with thirst. Could old Battuta stand the heat? You bet he could. On his action-packed trip, he spent a year in the Kingdom of Mali in West Africa, canoed down the river Niger, and visited the legendary desert city of Timbuktu. There we go with his big suitcase on his camel. By the time he reached home again in 1354, he traveled over 120,000 kilometers on his various trips. He spent the rest of his life writing a book and trying to remember where on earth he'd been. And in case you're having trouble keeping track, don't worry. Here's Miles with a handy map of his travels. There we go. All of Battuta's travels. He went all over the place. Another earth-shattering fact. For years, the city of Timbuktu had tantalized travelers. It had been a center of desert trade for centuries, and tales of its fabulous wealth spread far and wide. But until the 19th century, no one from Europe had ever been there and come back alive. In 1826, dashing British soldier Alexander Gordon Laing managed to reach Timbuktu, but he'd hardly set foot in the city when a local chief accused him of being a spy and had him murdered in his sleep. The next explorer you're going to meet didn't make it to Timbuktu. He got horribly sidetracked. But he didn't feel hard done by. He discovered his own long-lost desert city quite by accident.